Hey everyone, and welcome back. Have you ever just found yourself, reaching for your phone? You're not even really thinking about it, you just do it.
Oh, absolutely.
Or maybe you demolish a whole bag of chips when you told yourself you'd only have a handful.
It happens to the best of us.
We've all been there. And today we're going deep on those hidden forces that shape those everyday actions with B.F. Skinner's Science and Human Behavior.
Such a foundational text.
Get ready, because this one is going to make you see yourself in a whole new light.
It's true. We often kind of just move through life reacting to things without ever really understanding why we do the things we do.
It's like we're on autopilot half the time.
Yeah.
But what if I told you there's a way to understand those, seemingly automatic behaviors, even the ones that drive us crazy?
There.
Skinner, he sets out this radical idea. What if we could understand human behavior as precisely as, say, physics understands how gravity works?
It's an ambitious goal that Skinner sets for us. And he
Right.
starts by saying, we need to set aside these big, vague ideas of, the mind or free will for a second
Right.
and focus on what we can actually observe, the environment, and how it shapes what we do.
Okay. I'm intrigued, but also a little freaked out, I'm not going to lie. Does this mean, we're all just puppets reacting to our surroundings?
Not quite puppets, but our surroundings really do influence us more than we realize.
Okay.
Think about it this way. Have you ever, touched a hot stove and just instantly pulled your hand back?
Yeah.
Without even thinking.
Ouch. Yeah. Who hasn't?
That's your body responding to an external stimulus right there. Skinner points to this, fascinating experiment with a salamander.
Okay.
Scientists found they could make a salamander's severed tail move just by, stimulating it.
What?
Even without a brain, the tail reacted.
Wow.
It shows just how powerful external factors can be.
Wow. That's wild. So even something as I don't know, as basic as a reflex can be traced back to something outside of us.
Exactly. And this kind of leads us to the work of Pavlov.
Okay.
You know, the guy with the dogs and the bell. Everyone focuses on the drooling dogs.
Right.
But the bigger point is that you can actually predict and control behavior just by changing what comes before the action.
So it's not just about instinct, it's about learning to associate certain things with certain outcomes.
Yes.
If I see a notification on my phone, I instantly want to check it.
Exactly. We've learned to associate that notification sound with something potentially interesting, something rewarding.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But it also makes me wonder, are we really that easy to manipulate?
Well, remember that pigeon we talked about earlier?
Yeah.
Skinner did this famous experiment where he trained pigeons to do some pretty specific things just by rewarding them with food.
Okay, I'm listening. How do you train a pigeon to, dance?
It's about understanding what Skinner called operant conditioning.
Okay.
Basically, behaviors are shaped by their consequences, not just by what comes before them. In one experiment, he trained a pigeon to, stretch its neck in a specific way.
Okay.
Each time the pigeon did it, bam, food reward.
Clever.
The pigeon had no idea why it was doing that. It just learned that action led to something good.
So you're saying that we, like those pigeons, might be doing things for reasons we're not even aware of, all because of some unconscious reward system.
It's possible.
That's both fascinating and a little terrifying.
It is fascinating. And it's not just about those positive rewards either. There's also the absence of a reward, what Skinner called extinction.
Okay.
Remember how we talked about that pigeon stretching its neck?
Uh-huh.
If the food rewards stopped coming, the pigeon would have eventually stopped the behavior.
Makes sense. Why keep doing something if it's not getting you anywhere?
Mm.
But how does that apply to us?
Think about writer's block.
Okay, yeah.
You sit down to write, but nothing's coming.
The worst.
That feeling of being stuck can actually be explained by a lack of reinforcement for your writing. You aren't getting those little dopamine hits from finishing a paragraph, finishing a page, getting positive feedback.
Okay. So if our environment and its rewards are pulling all these strings, what happens to good old-fashioned willpower?
Right.
The whole, I'm going to resist that cookie kind of thing.
That's where Skinner really throws a wrench in traditional thinking. He says we need to redefine self-control.
Redefine it. How so?
Well, we often think of willpower as this, inner strength, right?
Right.
But Skinner says it's actually just another set of learned behaviors.
Right.
Remember, training that pigeon. We aren't controlling some mystical inner self. We're just changing our environment or how we react to it.
Okay, so instead of relying on willpower alone, I could just, hide the cookies.
Exactly. You're manipulating your environment to control your behavior.
Sneaky, sneaky.
There's an example in the book. If you bite your nails, try putting your hands in your pockets.
Yeah.
You're not relying on some abstract idea of willpower. You're changing your environment to, like, prevent the action in the first place.
Right. Blown. So we're kind of training ourselves even when we don't realize it.
Precisely.
Wow.
And it gets even more complex.
Okay.
Skinner says even things we think of as higher-level thinking, like making decisions or solving problems,
Yeah.
can be understood as us manipulating external and internal stimuli.
So even when I think I'm making a free and conscious choice,
Right.
there's a whole lot more going on under the surface.
Yeah.
This is making me rethink everything.
And that's what a good deep dive should do, isn't it? Makes you question your assumptions and see things in a new light.
It certainly does.
Yeah.
But this leads to a pretty big question. If we're unconsciously shaping our behavior all the time,
Right.
what does that even mean for personal responsibility?
That's a question that has no easy answer, but it's one we should definitely explore further.
Okay, I need like a minute to process all of this.
It's a lot to take in.
So we're constantly being shaped by our environment, often in ways we don't even realize.
Right.
But where does that leave us in terms of, well, making choices?
It's not about denying our ability to make choices, but like understanding the factors that influence those choices, you know?
Okay.
Remember those variable reinforcement schedules we touched upon?
Yeah.
Skinner dives deep into those on pages 100 to 106. And they're like a game changer in understanding how our actions are influenced.
Okay, refresh my memory on those. What's a variable reinforcement schedule again?
Okay, think about it this way. Let's say you want to, like, train a dog to shake a paw.
Okay.
With fixed reinforcement, you give them a treat every single time they shake.
Right.
But with variable reinforcement, you mix it up.
Okay.
Sometimes they get a treat, sometimes they don't, and there's no predictable pattern.
And what makes variable reinforcement so special?
Well, think about those addictive apps we all love to hate.
Oh no, don't do it.
You know how sometimes you scroll through tons of boring stuff online,
Uh-huh.
but then there's that one hilarious meme or that piece of news that
Yeah.
makes you want to just keep scrolling?
Ugh. Yes. That's totally me with Instagram. Like, what am I even doing?
Exactly. Skinner would say that's variable reinforcement hooking you in.
Oh, man.
Those unpredictable rewards, those little dopamine hits,
Yeah.
they create this persistent, almost addictive pattern of behavior because you're always hoping for that next hit of excitement.
So it's not just that, like, social media is inherently evil.
Right.
It's the way it's, like, designed to exploit these basic principles of behavior that we might not even be aware of.
Precisely. And it goes beyond social media. Think about slot machines in casinos.
Oh, yeah.
They operate on a similar principle, right?
Yeah.
You never know when you're going to hit the jackpot. So you keep pulling that lever, you keep feeding more money into the machine, hoping for that big win.
Okay, this is starting to feel a bit less like self-improvement and a bit more like we're all being subtly manipulated by these systems.
Yeah, and that's precisely why understanding these principles is crucial.
Okay.
Once you see the mechanisms at play, you can start to make more, I don't know, conscious choices about how you interact with your environment.
Right.
Knowledge really is power.
Okay, I'm starting to see that.
Yeah.
But let's talk about another kind of power for a second.
Okay.
The power we have to influence each other. Skinner gets into some pretty fascinating stuff about, like, how we control each other's behavior, right?
He does. He actually dedicates a whole section to the behavior of people in groups,
Okay.
starting on page 297. He breaks down all these different ways we exert control over each other, from like simple reinforcement to, oh man, some seriously complex social dynamics.
Okay, so give me an example. Like, how do these principles play out in our everyday interactions?
Well, let's start simple. We all know that like giving someone a compliment can make them feel good
Right.
and more likely to repeat whatever behavior earned them that compliment.
Totally, yeah. It's like positive reinforcement 101.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But there's also negative reinforcement, where you remove something unpleasant to achieve the same effect.
Okay.
Think about a boss who finally stops nagging an employee once they, improve their performance.
Yeah.
It's not about giving something positive, it's about taking away something negative.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all about shaping behavior by, like, changing the consequences.
Precisely. And then, of course, there's punishment, which Skinner argues can have all sorts of unintended consequences.
Right.
He was particularly critical of, like, relying too heavily on punishment in areas like education.
Yeah, I could see how that could backfire. Like, kids might start to fear school or their teachers instead of actually learning.
Exactly. Skinner believed that focusing on positive reinforcement and really understanding the function of unwanted behaviors
Right.
was a much more effective and ethical approach.
So it's not just about trying to control people. It's about understanding what drives their behavior
Right.
and creating environments that encourage positive choices.
Exactly. And this brings us to one of the most, I think, fascinating and potentially unsettling sections of the book:
Okay.
personal control.
Okay, unsettling in what way? It sounds like personal control should be a good thing.
Well, depends on how it's wielded. Skinner points out that we all have a certain amount of power to control the behavior of others, whether we realize it or not. We do this by manipulating, even if unintentionally, those variables that influence their actions.
Okay, I'm starting to see where the unsettling part comes in.
Yeah.
So it's like how, a parent might use rewards and punishments to control a child's behavior.
That's one example. But it goes beyond that.
Okay.
Think about a charming salesperson using persuasion techniques to close a deal, or a politician giving a rousing speech to sway voters.
Okay, yeah.
Are they being manipulative,
Right.
or are they just skilled communicators? It's a question worth pondering.
Wow, so even things like charisma and persuasion
Right.
can be seen as tools of control,
Yeah,
even if they're not always used with malicious intent.
exactly. And the more skilled you become at understanding and utilizing these principles, the more influence you might have over others. It's a powerful idea.
Yeah.
And it's why Skinner emphasizes the importance of ethical awareness when
Right.
it comes to applying these principles.
So how do we navigate this? How do we balance understanding the power of influence with, not becoming master manipulators ourselves?
That's where things get even more interesting. We need to dive deeper into Skinner's concept of the self.
Okay.
If our behaviors are so malleable, then who's really in control here?
Okay, you've officially blown my mind with this whole personal control thing. If we have the power to influence each other so much, even unintentionally,
Yeah.
then where does that leave the idea of the self? Who's really in the driver's seat?
That's the million-dollar question, right? And it's something Skinner tackles head-on in his exploration of the self. Let's see, starts on page 283.
Okay.
He challenges us to think of the self not as some fixed entity, but as something that's constantly being shaped by, all those experiences we've been talking about.
So you're saying that who we are, even our deepest values and beliefs, it's all just a product of our environment and experiences.
To a large extent, yeah. It might seem a bit radical at first,
Yeah.
but think about it. Your personality, your quirks, even your moral compass,
Yeah.
they've all been shaped by a lifetime of experiences, relationships, cultural influences, all of it.
Whoa. Okay, I need a minute to process this.
Right.
On the one hand, it feels a little deterministic,
Yeah,
we're
yeah.
just products of our environments.
Right.
But on the other hand, there's a part of me that finds it kind of liberating.
Okay.
Maybe we're not stuck with some predetermined self.
That's exactly the point. If the self is more, I don't know, fluid than we often think it is,
Yeah?
then we have more agency than we might realize to shape who we become. It's not about denying the influence of the past, but recognizing that we have the power to keep learning, growing, evolving.
Okay, yeah, I could see how that's empowering.
Yeah.
But we take this idea of the malleable self and kind of zoom out to a bigger picture.
Okay.
What does it mean for how we build a society? Can we use this knowledge to create a world that's, I don't know, a little less chaotic
Yeah.
and a little more, functional and kind?
That's the big question Skinner grapples with in his chapter on designing a culture, starting on page 427.
Okay.
He suggests that it's not just about designing buildings or systems, but designing environments,
Okay.
both physical and social, that actually encourage the behaviors we want to see.
So not just telling people what to do, but actually creating a world where they're more likely to make positive choices.
Yeah.
That sounds, I don't know, kind of ambitious.
It is ambitious, and Skinner says it all goes back to those principles of behavior we've been talking about. Instead of just focusing on punishing the bad,
Right.
we need to get a lot better at reinforcing the good.
Okay, so less stick, more carrot.
Exactly.
Right.
Think about it. If we want to reduce things I don't know, crime,
Right.
maybe we need to focus more on creating a world where everyone has access to quality education,
Right.
job opportunities,
Yeah.
a sense of community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those are powerful reinforcements for positive behavior.
So it's not just a matter of individual choices. It's about creating a system that actually supports those choices.
That's the idea.
Okay.
Skinner was convinced that if we applied these principles thoughtfully,
Yeah.
we could design a culture that supports, individual well-being and collective flourishing.
That's a really hopeful idea. But realistically, how do we even begin to shift something as massive and complex as, well, our entire culture?
It's a huge undertaking, no doubt.
Right.
But Skinner points to the success of applying behavioral principles in areas like therapy, for instance.
Okay.
We've seen how effective things like, cognitive behavioral therapy
Right.
can be in helping people overcome challenges and,
Yeah.
make positive changes.
He believed that same type of thinking could be scaled up to address, broader social issues.
So it's like taking what we've learned about individual behavior change
Yeah.
and applying it to the way we design our systems or institutions,
Right.
even our communities.
That's the idea. And again, it's not about controlling people,
Right.
but it's about understanding what makes them tick and using that knowledge to create a world that, works better for everyone.
This has been such an incredible deep dive. I feel like I have a whole new framework for understanding not just myself, but the world around me.
It's powerful stuff.
It really is. So for our listeners out there who are just as fascinated by all of this as I am,
Yeah.
what's the key takeaway?
Wow.
What should they do with all this new knowledge?
I think the biggest takeaway is this. We aren't just passive passengers in our own lives.
Okay.
We have the power to shape our behaviors, our environments, even, our own sense of self.
Right.
And while we might not have complete control over every little thing,
Right.
understanding these principles of behavior gives us a powerful tool for creating positive change.
It's about understanding the rules of the game so we can start playing it a little more intentionally.
Exactly. It's about recognizing our own agency,
Yeah.
the power we have to make choices that shape our own lives and the world around us.
This has been an incredible journey into the world of B.F. Skinner and science and human behavior. A huge thank you to you, expert speaker, for breaking it all down with us today.
Happy to be here.
And to our listeners, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time for another fascinating exploration.